We would like to welcome you all, the media, credit providers, consumers, regulatory bodies, and colleagues to the first collaborative campaign between the Credit Ombud and the Microfinance South Africa. This initiative was brought on by the rising concerns on leading practices by credit providers and consumer behavior when it comes to money lending, with the purpose of the National Credit Act being to promote and advance the social and economic welfare of South Africans, to promote a fair and transparent, competitive, sustainable, responsible, efficient, effective, and accessible credit market industry, and to protect consumers. It becomes vital that all involved parties in the credit industry have full knowledge of their roles in ensuring that all rights are protected and responsibilities are understood. Now, just a few housekeeping rules. Please do note that this webinar is on a Zoom platform, and we do have a chat box facility available should you have any questions or platforms. We will have a session where we actually engage and have questions and answers session. Please do also note that load shedding and poor connectivity will affect your ability to join this event. The recording of the event will be made available after the event, and please ensure that you are muted to contribute to an enjoyable event experience for everyone. Now, just to get into the purpose behind the collaboration, I mean, you would ask yourself, the microfinance, South Africa, as well as Credit Ombud, how? Well, basically, the two organizations, with the microfinance being the trusted voice of responsible microfinanciers in South Africa, their purpose is to guide credit providers on how to offer the best service to consumers. And then the Credit Ombud enforces fairness in non-bank credit and credit bureau matters. They want to assist and guide consumers on how to build a healthy credit life. Now, with the two organizations being advocates for fair business practices in the credit industry, so they can ensure that all parties thrive and achieve what they intend to. Both organizations want to play their part in educating and raising awareness in credit-related matters. Basically, they are saying consumer, credit provider, the MFSA and Credit Ombud has got your back. You know where to go to should you need any guidance. Now, the program of the webinar will go like this. We have two presentations. The first one will be from the Credit Ombud, Mr. Howard Gabriels, and then we will have the next presentation being from Leonie van Pletzen from the MFSA. We will also have a time to explain what your role in responsible lending is, because I believe that as we are all here, we have the same goal of having to educate and raise awareness. And we'll also have then a time for comments and engagements. Again, I do actually encourage that you do type on that chat box that is available to you, and that comments and engagements will also lead to the closing. But before the closing, we will have a little fun activity before we all then go our separate ways and close the webinar. So I would like to introduce our first speaker for the webinar, which is Mr. Howard Gabriels, who is the Credit Ombud, and he will look at basically the responsibilities, and with rights basically comes responsibilities. So he will go deeper into the responsibilities and the rights for consumers and credit providers, and actually share how the Credit Ombud is taking action in responsible lending. Thank you very much. Over to you, Howard.
Thank you very much, Kabelo. Firstly, let me thank the staff and members of the MFSA, Leonie, Sune, and Kirsten. It has been a real pleasure working with you, preparing for this webinar. I think the partnership between the MFSA and the Credit Ombud is a really positive development. It's the first time this year that we come together like this. So I really appreciate the opportunity to participate in this webinar. I want to just start off with talking a little bit about the purpose of the Credit Ombud. And the main purpose is to effectively resolve disputes between members of the credit industry and the credit receivers or consumers with regards to credit and credit information business matters. But a second and important role for the Credit Ombud is to act as an educator of the public in matters pertaining to the credit industry. And the work of the Credit Ombud really depends on a set of values that is, firstly, require us to act honestly, secondly, independently and impartially. A really important principle to understand that the Credit Ombud wants to resolve disputes, and therefore it does not take sides between the consumer and the credit provider, but rather focus on balancing the rights of all parties. And then lastly, the principle of fairness. We want to build a successful credit industry in South Africa, and for that to happen, we need to be embracing the principle of fairness. The Credit Ombud jurisdiction cover credit information. So these are information that is primarily listed on the credit bureaus, so it covers everybody that list that are non-bank credit providers. They're also subscribers to the credit bureau, and then there's service providers that also list information on the credit bureau. The second mandate is to deal with non-bank credit matters. So that covers all non-bank credit providers, the retail industry, as in the furniture stores, the clothing stores, micro lending, non-bank vehicle finance, and non-bank property finance. So that is the broad jurisdiction within which the Credit Ombud operates. The Credit Ombud is an ombud with jurisdiction, and it's recognized by the Ombud Council in terms of Chapter 14 of the Financial Sector Regulation Act. This is a new development. Chapter 14 became operational in November 2020, and the Ombud Council was established in January 2021. And then in May, the Financial Sector Ombud Schemes Act was repealed, and now the recognition is in terms of Chapter 14. I'm happy to report at this event that the Ombud Council has granted the Credit Ombud status as an ombud with jurisdiction as of the 1st of May 2022. Also, for the credit providers, the Ombud is registered as a public benefit organization with SARS, and that means that membership fees could be considered as a donation, and there is the associated tax benefit with that. I'm now going to talk about responsible lending, and important to understand that there are two parties to this, both with rights and responsibilities. On the one hand, we have the credit providers, and on the other hand, we have consumers of the credit. So the act that governs this relationship is the National Credit Act, which was promulgated in 2005. Now, Kabelo has already, in an introduction, referred to this, but it's important to reflect on the purpose of the NCA. And some of you that have been active in the market in the 90s and early 2000s will remember that there was a very big concern at the time about over-indebtedness of consumers. And the National Credit Act very much tried to address this. So that in the first instance, it is designed to protect consumers, to provide that extra layer of protection of consumers. I know it's added in at the end of the statement on the purpose of the Act, but if we look back at that time, this was a very big goal that the NCA wanted to achieve. But more importantly, it also wanted to ensure that the social and economic welfare of South Africans is promoted through introducing a fair, transparent, competitive, a sustainable credit market. And really important that we understand the centrality of the NCA in the work that we do. For the Credit Ombud, we use the National Credit Act as the benchmark to evaluate all of our disputes. So in the NCA, consumers have rights. The right to apply for credit, the right to be protected against discrimination, the right to have reasons given for the refusal of credit, the right to receive information in an official language, the right to receive documents, protection of consumer credit rights, the right to receive a statement of account. Again, the statement of account is really important, and credit providers that are members of the Ombud, when there is a dispute, will know that we start off by looking at that statement of account to understand what has happened in the life of the credit agreement between the consumer and the credit provider. The right to plain and understandable language, the right to be treated confidentially, and the right to challenge the credit records. So really important rights that are enshrined in the NCA. But with rights comes the responsibility. So really important to understand that too often we focus on the rights we have, and not very often we focus on the responsibilities we have. So what are the responsibilities of the consumer? The first important point is that we as consumers must take responsibility for our own financial health. If we don't take responsibility for our own financial health, no one else will. So when we need to borrow money, then it is so important that we make sure that the credit provider from whom we seek to borrow money is registered with the NCR. I can't emphasize this more, because if you borrow from somebody that is not registered, there are potentially huge problems down the road for me as a consumer. The second part, I've said we must take responsibilities for our own financial health. How do we do that? Firstly, we must know our situation. And the easiest way, and the first thing we must do, is to request a copy of our credit profiles from the credit bureau. In terms of the NCA, we're entitled to one free copy of our credit profile from each of the credit bureaus. Really important for us to, as consumers, to take charge of our life is to understand exactly what is the information that is situated on my credit profile. The second part is to prepare a budget. When we run businesses, we all know that we prepare a business plan. In other words, we're trying to work out what we're going to do, who we're going to do this with, what staff requirements we have. And then we need to prepare a financial plan or budget. And every year, every business goes through a process of revising their budgets in line with their business plan. Similarly, individual consumers or families need to have a budget for what their responsibilities will be in their financial journey over the year. And we really need to do that on an annual basis and then monitor it month by month. So what is the budget? The budget is firstly looking at what is the money that comes into the individual's life or into the family's life, and what is our responsibilities? What do we have to spend that money on? And we can't emphasize this part enough for consumers to take responsibility for this. The second part is, so now we need money in addition to do the things we have. So we need money to buy a house. We need money to buy a car. We need money to buy furniture. We need money to buy clothing and all the things. And if we require that money from a credit provider, it is really important that we know what we are agreeing to in the contract that is provided. So the credit provider is obligated to give us a quotation. And we have 5 days in terms of the NCA to consider that credit agreement, to take it home and read the credit agreement, to even go and shop around and see if there isn't a better interest rate that I can get somewhere else. Those 5 days is really important also to calm us down, because sometimes when we buy the car, we are so excited, or even just the furniture or new clothing. We are so excited to buy the clothing, and then we don't think about the obligations we have, in that agreement. So really, as consumers, we need to understand what is the agreement we enter into. Take the 5 days, make sure we read the fine print, and also make sure that the information we've provided in that contract is accurate. It does not help us when we pretend that we're spending much less because we want to argue with the credit provider that we have more disposable income to pay for this loan, when in fact it is not the truth. Then the last point, as consumers, when we are not happy, when something happens that makes us unhappy, don't keep quiet. Go and find where you can get help. And the Credit Ombud is one of those places that you can get help from. I will talk a little bit later again about where the how the Credit Ombud operates. But at this point, just to say that if you approach the Credit Ombud, we've really made it easy for you to contact us, and I'll give you the detail at the end. And then secondly, even if the Credit Ombud is not able or not the right place to assist you, we're able to guide you as to where you can get the right assistance as a consumer. So really important that you use this opportunity to address the unhappiness you feel. And most importantly, the services that we provide are free to the consumers. So let's talk briefly about the responsibilities of the credit providers. And I'm sure all the credit providers that are participating in this webinar is familiar with these things, but I just want to highlight a few points. The affordability assessment in a responsible lending is really important. So really the emphasis there is making sure that the consumer will be able to afford the monthly repayments that comes with the credit agreement. And for that, an affordability assessment needs to be done as required by the NCA, and the regulations of the NCA spell out in detail how that should be done. But the key elements for, to explain this to consumers is that the credit provider will look at your credit profile. Secondly, the credit provider will ask you for 3 months proof of income, will ask you to give a budget for your expenses on a monthly basis. And through that, the credit provider will make an assessment whether you are over indebted and may not be able to afford the funds that is provided. Secondly, credit providers must provide the consumer with adequate information, and especially where consumers are not familiar with English, must provide an opportunity to adequately explain the details of the credit agreement to the consumer. And when credit is denied, to give full reasons for that. And then lastly, I want to emphasize that credit providers must be compliant with the requirements of the NCA and also the Financial Sector Regulation Act. Just a little bit about the Accredited Ombud. In March this year, 2021, we signed a memorandum of understanding with the NCR, which provides that as an alternative to disputes investigated by the NCR against members of the Credit Ombud, the NCR shall refer non-bank credit agreement and credit information to the Ombud. Now really, since we have signed this agreement, we have set all the processes in motion. The work we're doing with the NCR is a really positive development for us as the Credit Ombud. And we have further agreed with the NCR that we provide them with quarterly reports regarding the resolution of disputes that were referred by the NCR. And then we cooperate with the NCR in capacity building and training, in consumer awareness and education, and also in research and information. So far, this has been a very, very positive development for the Ombud. We also refer disputes that are coming to us against non-members to the NCR for them to deal with in terms of their own procedures. I want to take this opportunity to make credit providers aware of Section 211 of the Financial Sector Regulation Act. And it states that if a financial institution provides financial products and financial services, there is a recognized industry ombud scheme that provides for resolution of complaints about financial products or services of that kind. The financial institution must be a member of an industry ombud. This provision came into effect on the 1st of November 2020, and we're happy to report at this meeting that many credit providers who've become aware of this have joined the Ombud, and our membership is steadily growing, especially in the microlending area. Also to thank the MFSA for their assistance and cooperation they have given us to speak to their members about their obligation to be a member of the Ombud scheme. I'm getting to the end of my presentation. So how do we help consumers? Firstly, the services of the Ombud is free of charge for consumers. And this allows us to really deal with disputes in an environment that is not legalistic and formal, and really focus in on the core issues of the dispute and trying to find resolution of the dispute. We have a call center and our telephone number is listed there. And what we have done is we've introduced a free SMS line, so consumers can just send us a message like help to 44786, and then we will call the consumer back. Since COVID, we have seen our email address, the number of complaints that come through that inbox, Ombud at Accredited Ombud, has been increasing quite dramatically. And that is the other way in which the consumer can also contact us. So the consumer always is encouraged to get a reference number from the credit provider and give the credit provider or the credit bureau 20 days to resolve the dispute. If after 20 days the consumer received the response and is still unhappy, they're welcome to contact the Credit Ombud. Alternatively, if they don't receive a response after 20 days, then we will also lodge a dispute on that matter. So really important that consumers know their rights and that they know how to address the concerns they have. Finally, in closing, thank you for the response to this workshop. I'm really thrilled to be able to speak to so many people today, and I look forward to building and continue building this positive relationship with the MFSA and with credit providers and consumers in our industry. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Howard. And I can already see that our chat box is busy. Please do note, ladies and gentlemen, that we will have a time to actually engage later on and attend to those comments and those questions. I just wanted to say that I think that sometimes growing up, actually, I had a very negative notation when it came to credit, because all I could ever hear when I was young was my mom saying, oh, the. And what that means is that a lot of debt. And I thought that being a teenager, that means that when I'm an adult, I will have to deal with the stress of credit. And now that I know better, I'm like, oh, wait a minute, but my mom was supposed to plan. My mom was supposed to be wiser. I mean, credit is used as a tool. And as it says on the NCA, that it is meant to, it actually wants to promote and advance the social and economic welfare of South Africans. That is what it's meant to do. It's meant to aid, not to add to your ailments. So it's very important that we remember that credit is not a bad thing. It is a tool that is meant to assist. And the moment that you find yourself in trouble, that is where now you get to the point where you know where to go. And that is the point of this webinar. Now, I will introduce our next speaker, who is Leonie van Pletzen from the Microfinance South Africa. And she will basically be talking about how the MFSA is leading on set of responsible lending in the microfinance industry. Over to you, Leonie.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Cabello. And thank you so much for everyone that is attending today, our stakeholders, consumers, and the media. We really look forward to presenting to you in exactly what the MFSA does. So my name is Leonie van Pletzen. I'm the General Manager at Microfinance South Africa. And we are basically the voice of the reputable microfinance here in South Africa. I like Cabello's comment now on credit. Usually everyone is afraid of credit, but you shouldn't be afraid of credit. It is how you access credit and through who you access credit that is very, very important. So let me tell you a little bit about MFSA, Microfinance South Africa. We've been in the industry for years, and we really have a road to success with the National Credit Regulator as well. All of our members are registered with the National Credit Regulator. Our mission is to promote the interest of all of our members and their clients. So our members are particularly the short-term credit providers providing short-term loans to consumers. So as these credit providers, they then belong to the association, and we assist them with guidance, information in the industry to assist them to become compliant. But we do not only focus on the credit provider. We have a very consumer-centric approach, and we also want their clients to be happy. We focus on continuous advocacy, meaningful member interaction, and people and market development. It is very important for us that our members develop their clients as well in order to access fair and responsible credit. Our vision and values, we want to ensure a sustainable microfinance industry. We are professional and ethical, and we care about our members, their clients, society, and the natural environment. Sustainability in the credit market is very, very important for the association, and that's why we have a credit provider approach, and we also have a very consumer-centric approach. Currently, we represent more than 1,300 offices registered with the association. And these offices also comply to the National Credit Act, and they are registered with the National Credit Regulator. Now, our collaboration and our partnership with the Credit Ombud at this stage is very, very important because we want to provide our members and their consumers with assistance in order to become more compliant and more consumer-centric. This is our board of directors. We want to give you an overview of who sits on the board of directors and who does the representation. Paki Pashlele is our chairperson, Mariette Ichner is our vice chairperson, Sophie Kleuvulu is also our vice chairperson, and Naresh Gopishan is our treasurer. This is some of our other board members, and they come from different industries. So it's credit providers, it's consumer-centric bodies, it is other industries that provides the MFSA with guidance and assistance in order to assist our members and their clients. I want to start with this specific slide, and this is something that if you remember anything, this is the slide that you have to remember. The NCR's logo and the MFSA's logo. Registration with the National Credit Regulator is compulsory. According to the National Credit Act, all credit providers, irrespective of the size of loans or how many loans they do per month, they have to be registered with the NCR. But the MFSA is a voluntary association, and we actually support all of the rules of the NCR and the National Credit Act. So when you access credit, make sure you see the logo of the NCR and the MFSA, because there will be tools in order for consumers to get compliant credit, and also if there's some form of dispute resolution that has to take place, it just makes the process a lot easier. We also have our members that subscribe to a code of good practice, and I'm going to take you through just a couple of items that our members has to subscribe to and adhere to. Our members has to be ethical in everything they do, ethical in the way that they treat consumers, that they treat other credit providers, and that they treat service providers as well. They have to be compliant. Compliant with regards to rules of the National Credit Act, of the South African Reserve Bank, and all of the acts that has an influence on short-term credit providing. We also focus a lot on the Protection of Personal Information Act and making sure that our members and their clients are protected. Our members are accountable. Our members really take accountability for everything they do. And that is why association with the MFSA and also registration with the NCR is very, very important. Our members are transparent in their businesses, and they make sure that they comply with the National Credit Act. Then our members are truthful in everything that they do. If there is questions by consumers or concerns, that's where our members come in and say, let's talk about a situation and let's get a truthful answer. The MFSA is also very proud of our members because they are professional. They make use of professional systems, professional service providers in order to make their businesses compliant and regulated. So our members are striving to become even more professional every day. The association also assists them with their professionalism. We've got training sessions on a monthly basis where we guide our members in order to become compliant and even more professional. Then last but not least is consumer centricity. Consumer centricity is very, very important for the association because without the consumer, there wouldn't be a credit provider. So it is important for us that our members focuses on the consumer's needs and make sure that they are met in a compliant way. And that's where the Credit Ombud Partnership and the MFSA also comes in, where we assist our members. Fear versus trust. Like Abelo stated, usually fear goes together with credit, and that is something that the MFSA and our members do not want. We want to replace your fear of credit with trust. And how can you trust credit? How can you trust your credit provider? And that's once again when we say trust is earned when actions meet words. So our members' words are put into actions. So when you see the MFSA and the NCR's logo, you can trust those logos and you can trust those credit providers, and you can know that they've got the consumer's best interest at heart. There's some important considerations that I want the consumers to really focus on. And this is something that really enjoys a lot of attention in our credit providers' offices. And the first one is budget. The consumers must make sure that they budget on a monthly basis. Make sure that you can afford the credit and that it actually fits within your budget. You must also distinguish between wants and needs. Is the items that you require, is it a want or is it a need? Is it a must-have or is it a nice-to-have? So make sure that there is a good, that you can distinguish between the different forms of items that you want and why you are accessing credit. Save, save, save. It is really important for MFSA and our members that our consumers save and that there is really a focus on saving mechanisms. Even if you do it in an informal way, make sure that you save on a monthly basis. Know who to borrow from. Guys, Mashunisas, Loan Shark, Scoppers, there are a number of them out there. They are not registered with the NCR. They are not registered with the MFSA. They do not comply to the rules and regulations of affordable and compliant credit. So know when you borrow from a credit provider that they are registered with the NCR and the MFSA. Once again, if you remember something, remember these two logos and registration with these two bodies. It is very important that when you access credit, that you make sure it is from a compliant credit provider that follows the rules, that has the right service providers that can provide you with a professional need and service. Understanding your credit. Make sure that you understand your documentation and contracts. And if you are unsure, talk to your credit provider. They are more than willing and able to explain the documentation to them. Don't just sign anything nilly-willy. Make sure that you understand the documentation and what the fees and the responsibilities of you as a consumer is. can you afford the credit? I think this is very important for the association, is the consumer has to be honest with the credit provider. Tell the credit provider exactly what your income and your expenses are, and make a decision and see, can you really afford the credit? Be honest and truthful when submitting your affordability, because that will also give the credit provider a clear indication of what services and offerings he can give you. And talk to your credit provider. I think it is very, very important for us that if you have an issue with credit that has been granted to you, or a repayment and that you can't repay, MFSA and our members are always open for consideration in talking about some form of agreement that we can reach. All of our members are there for the consumers, and we want to sort things out with our consumers. So talk to your credit provider. If you have an issue, even if it is only a once-off, and you know that next month things will go better, make sure that you address your credit provider first before you take any other action. Go to your credit provider, talk to them, and let them hear what your situation is and figure it out together. Figure the situation and the problem out together before you do anything else. Once again, our focus is on the NCR and the MFSA logo. This is very important for us, that you associate fair access and legal access to credit with these logos, especially that of the NCR, because that is a compulsory registration. If you access credit, make sure that everyone is registered with the National Credit Regulator. We really want to replace your fear of credit with that of trust. Make sure that you trust your credit provider, that you trust the process, and that you trust everything with regards to the documentation and understanding of it. The MFSA also has a partnership with the Accredited Ombud, and we are very proud of that partnership. I think this is a partnership that will even just grow even more in the future. And then also Chapter 14 of the Financial Sector Regulation Act that came into effect on the 1st of November states that all credit providers has to be registered with an Ombud. Make sure that when you talk to your credit provider that they are registered with an Ombud as well. We are proud to say that the majority of our members are registered with an Ombud, and if they are not yet registered, they are in process. So if you talk to the Credit Ombud and you have a complaint specifically about a credit provider from the MFSA, they will be able to sort the problem and situation out for yourself as well. We are once again the trusted voice of responsible microfinanciers. So if you see our logo and if you go to a credit provider that's registered with the MFSA, know what our values are, ethical conduct, compliance, and consumer centricity, and the fact that we are there for the consumers in making sure that you can access responsible and fair credit. So that is my presentation. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I look forward to engage with you even more on an ongoing basis.
Thank you so much, Leonie. And I have to say that I am quite happy with a lot of points that you actually raised. I mean, when it comes to credit, number one, needs versus wants. Now, ladies, that does not mean that you can eventually get your crush to ask you out on a date, that going and applying for credit to get a new dress is a need. It's not. You probably have more clothes in your closet anyway. So I'm actually, like I said, I'm actually glad with the MFSA. I mean, credit providers should want to be part of the solution in sustainable consumption and compliance with the National Credit Act will assist in making the consumer more confident to make use of the goods and services. Like Leonie mentioned, the fact that it is very important that you see the NCR. I mean, when we do activations, and we are, especially with mall activations, I always show the consumers that you see at that window of the specific store, there is that sign for the NCR. That means that that credit provider is registered with the NCR, and that means that you can trust that they will give you good service. I mean, the moment that you actually build that trust, the consumers will also, obviously, I mean, word of mouth is the greatest tool of marketing. And the moment that I go to a registered and trusted credit provider and they give me good service, best believe I will definitely be telling other people about it. And that is the purpose, again, I mentioned, of this very webinar, of the collaboration. And this is where it brings me to your role. As we are all here, we are credit providers, we are regulatory bodies that are here, we are also, more importantly, also consumers. And our role, basically, when it comes to responsible lending, is to be informed. We are here to share information. We are here to actually say that if you do not know where to go, we are here and you can rather ask us. I mean, just this morning, I was very excited just before the webinar when my cousin sent me a message and saying that, but I've got a friend who's got an issue with a certain bank, and my excitement, the fact that they know they can come to me. Now, as much as I may not have all the answers, I know somebody who will have the answer to whatever query that they may have. And that is the kind of attitude we are supposed to have, to say that I'm not only working in the industry just so that I can get paid. Yes, obviously, we do get paid for what we do, but more importantly, it is the mission that we are on. We are on that mission of teaching, of taking the knowledge that we have. And as we are being informed right now, this is also saying that you are going to take this message, you're going to take this information, and you are going to share it. We are paying it forward. And bit by bit, eventually, most South Africans will know about their rights, will know about the responsibilities. I mean, we don't want that tomorrow we find consumers not having to know that they can go to a credit bureau. And this is something that we find in the field as well. I mean, many of my colleagues who are doing education will vouch for that, that we meet consumers who don't know the basic things when it comes to credit. I was once in the Free State with the NCR, and I asked a room full of people that who of us actually can say that we don't have credit. And all of us, we looked at each other. So basically in that room, we all had access to credit, and we've entered into a credit agreement. But my next question was that, but who of us have actually requested their free credit report? And none of the people in that entire room got a hold of their credit report. And that is something that we need to start looking into, to say that us as a body, us as in the credit industry, credit bureaus, how are we reaching those consumers who do not have access to internet? How do they get their credit profile? Do we start mobilizing credit bureaus services? But we need to find solutions so that we can reach the unreachable, because clearly they have access to credit, but do they have access to assistance? So in the words of Professor Bonke Dumisa, who is the tribunal at the KZN, in KZN, he said, let us make consumer activism sexy and fashionable so that consumer rights will be accessible to all South Africans instead of just the well-informed few, which is very true. And that all South Africans should have access to credit and education pertaining to credit-related matters. We need to replace that fear consumers have for credit providers with the faith in the NCA, which governs and protects, which is very true, because there's no point in us saying you are going to enter into a store and apply for credit, but you're too scared to even speak to your credit provider when you find yourself in trouble. So I am going to just go into our chat box, because I see that we already do have a few queries. If I can have Howard and Leonia as well as Avitha to just quickly assist me in replying to those, I would really appreciate it. The first one I will read out is from Gumani, who's asking, does the telecommunications service providers fall under non-bank credit providers? I see they do check affordability and where possible deny consumers contracts offering due to affordability issues.
Kabelo, I can answer that question. Yes, the telecom service providers are members of the Credit Ombud. The providers like Vodacom, MTN, Cell C, and so on. And we deal with quite a few disputes relating to especially the listing of consumers on the credit bureaus in relation to their performance on the agreements for mobile. a lot of the credit provider, the telecommunication service are asking consumers to give them details in their credit, in their application for credit or for the agreement to provide them with the service and monthly deductions on the basis of that agreement. So yes, they do check affordability, and yes, they are members of the Credit Ombud, and we deal with an extensive number of complaints relating to the relationship between especially the cell phone users and the cell phone providers.
Thank you for that. I hope that answers your question quite clearly, Gumani. And the second question is from Zukisi. And his question is that, is it 5 days to go through the pre-agreement quotation or 5 business days?
I'm sorry, I should have made it very clear. It is 5 business days.
Thank you very much for that. And then Vanessa asks that does debt review related matters fall within that jurisdiction of non-bank credit agreements?
Amvita, can you deal with that question?
Thank you. So debt review disputes generally are referred to the National Credit Regulator's Office. Some time ago, the Credit Ombud were dealing with debt review matters, but the codes relating thereto were withdrawn, and all debt review disputes as it relates to issues on the debt review process or the debt counselor would be referred to the National Credit Regulator. The little disclaimer there, however, is that in the event that a consumer's dispute relates to a debt review flag removal from the credit bureau, then there's certain requirements and pre-ombud process relating to that specific issue that must first be complied with by the consumer. Namely, the consumer must first approach the credit bureau and for the credit bureau an opportunity to resolve the dispute. And in the event that the matter is unresolved and the debt review flag remains, provided certain criteria, like, for example, all paid up letters, the clearance certificate, and the National Credit Regulator's Debt Help System notification has been provided, the Credit Ombud would be able to take on that dispute on behalf of the consumer and liaise further with the Credit Bureau by providing that information through to them to enable them to remove the debt review flag. I trust that that responds adequately to the query posed.
Thank you very much, Avita, for that. And the next question is from Nosipo, who is asking, what are your SLAs in resolving customer complaints? I think that is to the Credit Ombud.
I'm happy to take on this question, Abelo, if that's good with you.
No problem.
So currently, the Ombud has engaged in an initiative where he meets with all subscribing members, and we are currently in the process there too. Just so much so to reiterate the mandate of the Credit Ombud Office, the requirements in terms of the Credit Ombud Constitution, insofar as our subscribing members' responsibilities lay. So in as much as there's no specific SLA that is signed between members, by virtue of their membership, there is an agreement that they would abide by the Constitution of the Credit Ombud Office, relevant processes, and codes of conduct where necessary. Thanks, Kabelo.
Thank you so much for that, Avi. And the next is actually a comment from Marissa. It says that it's a great perspective that we look at credit as a tool. And can we please not forget that it is not having extra money in your pocket. We have to actually plan for credit, and so that we don't, like I said, end into deeper, find ourselves in deeper problems. The next question, or rather question, yes, is from Karetha, who's saying that credit affordability is moving internationally to a more encompassing system of looking at the client's use of money, repaying behavior, etc., adding more depth to the current affordability rating system. Is this something we are incorporating?
Kabelo, I can respond to that. In a way, we're already incorporating this in our system. You need to understand that when credit providers lodge information with the credit bureaus, they're already putting up the client's behavior in how it's currently paying its current debts, and the credit profile already gives the credit provider a sense of the consumer's behavior in he or she being able to meet obligations on a monthly basis. So already we are incorporating some of this in the current. So credit providers would normally look at the credit profile in order to, as part of the assessment of whether the consumer can afford the new credit that is requested. Leonie?
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity. I think that there is a lot of questions. I can see the chat box specifically with regards to an affordability assessment and what happens and regulation 23A. I think we can go in very technical steps exactly what it encompasses and what you have to take into consideration. I think just making sure that you do a proper affordability and really take the practical steps to assess the consumers or the consumer or joint consumers' income is very important. I know that there were some court cases specifically with regards to the affordability of other means in order to identify additional income. And I think that should also be taken into consideration. So we can really, I don't think this is the forum to go into technical details of the affordability or 23A, but I think if there's concerns within the industry, let's do something together. Let's talk about certain situations about affordability, how it is being abused by certain stakeholders or industry players, and also the influence it has on credit providers and also that of consumers. I'm also seeing a comment here on reckless lending and reckless lending within debt review. I think this is also something that should be handled with care and caution, because remember, only a court of law can ever identify if something is reckless. So I think all of these subjects around affordability and reckless credit should be dealt with in a manner and to see how we can assist the consumer and how we can assist the credit provider. So maybe some of our next sessions should focus on reckless lending, should focus on affordability and how it is done. The association is there for the credit providers and the consumers, and we are really opening this up to say, guys, contact us if you have any concerns, and let's see how we can make changes for the best of the credit industry as a whole.
Well, I hope that answers you, Karetha. I see that Doreen has posted Leonie van Pletsen's number. So for all those who need to just contact and who have got further queries, feel free to contact Leonie. And the next question or comment is from Vanessa, who is asking, what is the credit industry stance on Regulation 23A minimum expense norm? We have found in the industry that many financial distresses, consumers, and credit providers makes use of these regulations to obtain credit, even if it is legal. Logically, I think it is the minimum amount is far too low. Hope that was
Maybe
understandable.
yes, maybe if I can add to that, I think that's what I'm saying is I wanted to comment on everything on 23A is if there is concerns and problems with the National Credit Act and certain regulations, then I think, that should be addressed with the National Credit Regulator. And I can also see Reinhard Pettenberger saying that he has brought it up with the NCR, and then they can escalate it to the DTI. If they see the systemic risk that this is going to involve, this is something that we should send to the NCR so that they can send it to the DTI.
Great, because I think Marissa as well wanted to share her views on the 23A. As she says that she agrees that the minimum amounts in 23A are very low. Does this get reviewed from time to time? With rising costs of living, this should also definitely be done. We also have a comment from Vanessa who says that, Marissa, I believe that we as an industry should collaborate and approach the DTI as it is creating chaos. It exposes the vulnerability and desperate and needy. And further, Reinhard did say that in agreement and have already brought this up with the NCR to approach the DTI. All right. So further on, we have a question. This is for the credit ombud. We have referred a client to the ombud as they stated that a company called them and falsely sold them their debt review process. Now they are charging them to take them off, but the ombud just told them to contact the NCR. Please advise where the client must go then.
Avita, you want to respond to that?
Thank you. Yes, look, that is a very interesting question because certainly within the confines of the credit ombud jurisdiction in dealing with debt review matters, unfortunately, we will not be able to consider the dispute per se insofar as the enrollment of the debt review process for whatever reason and however the process was followed against that debt counselor. However, the fact that the National Credit Act makes provision for disputes relating to debt review matters and debt counselors to be taken to the National Credit Regulator's office, certainly that matter may be moved and investigated by the regulator. Perhaps what I could offer is if the company that has referred the consumer to the regulator's office wishes to contact me directly, I'm happy to coordinate the referral to the regulator's office. We have a very good working relationship with the National Credit Regulator, and we are happy to assist in that process. So I invite the person to please get in touch with myself.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Avita. Now, Mzukisi asked that should credit providers stop all debit orders or collections when informed by debt counselors that their client has applied for debt review or after their debt review application has been approved?
Sabela, I'll take this one as well, if that's fine with you. So whilst the debt review process is being followed, we would always recommend to consumers, even if the matter does not fall within debt review, and if there is some dispute relating to an account or the service provided, consumers should continue making payments. And that is because there is a contract in place currently, and any deviation from payment to that contract would see the consumer possibly being in default. So the recommendation would always be maintain payments within the course of the process being followed.
Thank you very much for that, Avita. And just a quick comment from Maritz van den Heeven, that technology has allowed credit providers to move away from a manual affordability assessment to a L-driven assessment with the introduction of credit scorecards. However, the technology does not allow to cater for each and every consumer's specific financial circumstances, but to try and manage this, the NCR introduced the minimum living expense per income table. So as long as credit score acceptable and within these norms, credit is granted. Consumers have become wise and know how to manipulate their living expenses so they can afford the debt. One needs to assess each and every application, but this will mean credit providers will have to employ more staff and all about profitability. And then I see that Pizzo has asked, very interesting, that how much is interest charged? Break down, please.
So maybe for the microfinance industry, I think consumers must note that it changes for different credit transactions. But for the short-term unsecured industry, it is 3% on the first loan and then 5% on the second loan in the calendar year. And then there's also an initiation fee and the service fee that has to be taken into consideration. But that differs for different credit agreements.
Would you like to add to that, Avitha or Howie?
Yes, happy to do that. So just to add to Leonie's, which is quite right, the National Credit Act makes provision for maximum rates of interest that may be charged depending on the type of credit agreement that has been entered into. We're happy to forward a copy of the table that reflects on the regulations in terms of the Act. But just a takeaway there would be that whilst the consumer and credit provider may negotiate on the interest charged depending on the type of credit agreement, it's important to understand that it cannot exceed the maximum as prescribed in terms of the National Credit Act.
I hope that is sufficient for you, Pizzo. So I think the next comment from Reinhard was to answer about the debt review process. Please do correct me if I'm incorrect. He's saying that according to the task team agreement, once a client has been declared over indebted and a proposal has been sent to the creditor must stop the debit order. As I said, I think that was the answer to whether when a consumer goes under debt review, what basically happens to the debt. Benny Opperman says, Leonie agree, it must be sent to NCR, but they list the client as under debt review on Credit Bureau. They do not want to take the client off ITC before he has not paid the date, I think. Sure, this falls under Credit Ombud, as you cannot list someone under debt review if no processes was followed. And Marissa actually answered Reinhard to say that the proposal is usually only at the end of the process, not the first notification that the consumer has gone under debt review. Many debt counselors try to insist on debit order cancellation upon sending the 17.1 though. And Timmy answered Pizzo as well, saying that see Regulation 42 of the NCA to get that answer about the interest rates. The last comment that I have here is from Moritz. Oh, okay, Amarno also has a comment. But Moritz says that in the past, debt counselors were allowed to refer matters to the Credit Ombud. If not resolved at the NCR or the NCR did not respond within a reasonable period of time, this practice was stopped, but debt counselors will appreciate it if the process can be reinstated. The Credit Ombud is here and he is hearing your concern. Armando says that, please can we explain the difference between short-term transactions and unsecured credit transactions?
Right, so a short-term credit agreement is any loan under 8,000 Rand and for less than 6 months. Anything above that with no collateral is a unsecured credit agreement. So short-term, 8,000 Rand and less than 6 months.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Leonie. I think actually that is the end of our comments. We have a comment just from Reynard, who said he must follow the task team agreement. And Paul also added that the award-winning ones are all guilty of that. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that would be the last comment. I mean, you are free to also continue to comment and we'll try to get back to them. Thank you very much. Now we want to do a quick, wait, okay, I've got another comment here, just the last one, from Lungisi, who says that the banks encourage clients to cancel legit debit orders. Is that allowed according to the law? Where do we report such instances? Howie, Avi, Leonie?
Yeah. Well,
Cabello,
okay, go for it, Avita.
thank you. So I'm really not certain how to answer that the banks encourage consumers to cancel debit orders. I do appreciate that if there's a query relating to a debit order, the consumer would inevitably approach the bank as, of course, a first course of action to establish what was the debit order. But if you are asking whether it's allowed in law and where can that be reported, matters relating to bank disputes would be reported to the Ombudsman for Banking Services. However, if it is an ADO query, that's a different discussion, and perhaps we can take that query offline further.
I think that I can safely say that at the end, we will provide contact details for the Accredited Ombud and MFSA as well. Feel free to send emails with any queries that you might have, and we will then be able to respond to them. Am I correct, everyone? Okay. Yeah. So another thing that I actually wanted to add was the fact that the Accredited Ombud offers a double impact training to its members and its staff members rather. And this is also to assist not only the staff members with their own personal finances, but also to aid them on how to better serve the consumer. I mean, if at all one of the rights of the consumer that consumers have as per the National Credit Act is that they have the right to apply for credit, as well as having the right to be informed why credit has been declined, if at all it does get declined. And often we find that consumers will inform us, but I don't even know where to go. If you tell me that my credit score is low, I don't even understand that. And if at all your staff members have got this information that we are providing, which is informing them of the credit bureaus that we do have and basically how the credit industry works, then you know that you are sure that your staff members are well equipped to service those consumers and direct them to where to as to how or where to go to should they want to access their credit profiles. So we do actually encourage that. I mean, if you're a member of the Accredited Ombud, please do not hesitate. Just send us an email and we will arrange for a double impact training for your staff members. Thank you very much. Now, lastly, we would like to do a fun activity. Just to end off our session, to say, I want to ask everybody to switch on your Zoom cameras, right? And the moment that we switch on our Zoom cameras, we just want to do a quick screenshot of everybody who is in attendance. Yay, great. I'm missing a few people still. Don't be shy, even if you have your jammies on with your cup of coffee. Actually, I think that's actually what we want to see. We want to see those jammies. Wanda, I don't believe that.
Right.
Are we all ready? I don't think so.
And cheese.
Okay, and everybody then who is here, cheese. Thank you so much, everybody, for indulging and also indulging us in this little activity, and also for attending our session. It has been quite an informative session. And I am happy that everybody took some time off their busy schedules, and may it not end here, may it continue even after this session. We need, I mean, we have been posting on our social media pages all of the guidelines that we share with consumers about responsibilities and rights for consumers and credit providers as well. Please follow our pages and also share those and retweet if you can. The more people have got this information, the better this credit industry will run. I mean, you look at a car, we only see the body of it and how well it runs, but what it actually takes for that car to work is the mechanics inside. And there are many parts, and we are exactly all of those parts that are within this vehicle. And this vehicle needs to run smoothly, and it needs all of us to be functioning and to be working for it to work well. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a wonderful day further.